The morning sun crested over the eastern hills of Chico, California, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street as Sophia Harrington hurried toward the general store, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a sensible bun. At 42, she had become accustomed to the peculiar invisibility that seemed to envelop women once their youth had faded, a condition only hastened by the premature graying that had begun when she was barely 30. Sophia clutched her market basket tighter as she navigated the busy street, stepping aside as a group of young cowboys barreled past without so much as a glance in her direction. She had once turned heads in this very town, but that was before life had etched its passage across her face and threaded silver through her once chestnut hair. Before her husband, James had succumbed to pneumonia 3 winters ago, leaving her with their modest ranch and the burden of solitude. The bell above Willard's general store jingled cheerfully as she entered, a sound at odds with the heaviness she felt. Mr. Willard, occupied with a customer, merely nodded in her direction before returning to his conversation. Sophia moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency, selecting only what she absolutely needed. Her ranch, though small, provided most necessities, but coffee, sugar, and certain sundries remained beyond her capability to produce. "Morning, Mrs. Harrington," came a deep, unfamiliar voice from behind her. Sophia turned, startled that someone had addressed her directly. She found herself looking up into the weathered face of a man she didn't recognize. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a dust-covered duster and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across keen blue eyes. His beard, neatly trimmed but showing the same silver threads as her own hair, suggested he was perhaps near her own age. "Good morning," she replied cautiously, unused to being noticed, especially by strangers. "Drew Holloway," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Just arrived in town yesterday, taking over the old Milner place west of here." Sophia nodded, vaguely recalling that the Milner ranch had been sitting empty since old Mr. Milner had died last year. "Sophia Harrington, my place is about 3 miles east of town." "The widow Harrington?" he asked, and when she tensed slightly, he added, "Forgive me." "Small towns and their talk. I stopped at the saloon last night to learn about available properties." "Yes, I'm sure I was mentioned," she said with a hint of resignation. "The woman with the gray hair who keeps to herself." Drew's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Actually, they described you as the finest horsewoman in the county, with the best breeding stock this side of Sacramento." Sophia blinked in surprise. While her husband had indeed started a modest horse breeding operation before his death, and she had maintained it as best she could, she hadn't expected to be known for that rather than for her widowhood or her prematurely graying hair. "I'm in the market for good stock," Drew continued. "Thought I might pay you a visit in the next day or so, if that wouldn't be imposing." Before Sophia could respond, a commotion erupted outside the store. Shouts and the thunder of hooves drew everyone's attention to the street, where a team of horses had broken free from their wagon and were charging wildly down the main thoroughfare. Drew moved instantly, brushing past Sophia and out the door. She followed, watching as he positioned himself in the street, his movements calm and deliberate despite the danger. As the panicked horses approached, he stood his ground, speaking in a low, soothing voice that carried surprisingly far in the morning air. The lead horse slowed, responding to his tone, and Drew reached out, catching the bridle and bringing the animal to a halt. The crowd that had gathered began to applaud as the owner of the team rushed forward, profuse in his thanks. Drew nodded modestly, patting the now calm horse before turning back toward the store. His eyes sought Sophia's in the crowd, and she felt an unfamiliar warmth rise to her cheeks when their gazes met. "Quite impressive, Mr. Holloway," she said as he rejoined her. "Drew, please," he replied. And it was nothing. Horses understand fear better than most people. Sometimes they just need reminding they're not alone in their panic. There was something in the way he said it, something that resonated with Sophia in a way she hadn't expected. She'd been managing her fear alone since James died, keeping the ranch running, making decisions without a partner to consult, facing each new challenge with only her own resources to rely on. About that visit, she found herself saying, tomorrow would be fine. I'll be working with a new filly in the morning, but afternoon would suit. His smile brightened his whole face. I look forward to it, Mrs. Harrington. Sophia, she corrected, surprising herself with the informality. As they parted ways outside the store, Sophia caught her reflection in the window and automatically touched her gray, streaked hair. For the first time in years, she wondered if perhaps she wasn't as invisible as she had come to believe. The ride home felt lighter somehow, the familiar path along the creek taking on a fresher aspect in the spring sunshine. The ranch house came into view, white painted clapboard with green shutters, smaller than many but well maintained, with flower beds James had built for her still blooming faithfully each year. The stable and paddocks stretched behind it, where her small herd grazed peacefully. As she dismounted, her foreman, Miguel Vasquez, approached from the barn. All is well, Senora Harrington. The new filly is settling in good. Miguel had worked for James for years before his death, and his loyalty to Sophia afterward had been unwavering. With his wife, Elena, who helped in the house, and their son, Carlos, who had become an excellent stable hand, the Vasquez family formed the backbone of the ranch's operations. Thank you, Miguel. We have a potential buyer visiting tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Holloway, who's taking over the Milner place, Miguel nodded. I heard someone bought it. Good land needs work. Speaking of work, Sophia said, handing him her market basket so she could unsaddle her mare, I'd like to have the chestnut gelding and the bay ready for inspection tomorrow. And the filly, Sophia considered. The young horse was special, with bloodlines that promised speed and stamina. She had planned to keep her as breeding stock, but good business meant presenting your best. Yes, the filly too, but I'll make it clear she's not necessarily for sale. That evening, as Sophia sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, she found her thoughts returning to Drew Holloway. There had been something refreshing about being truly seen by someone new, someone without the weight of her history coloring their perception. She touched her hair absently, remembering how it had begun to change after Sarah was born. Sarah, her beloved daughter, now 23 and married to a banker in San Francisco. She had James' eyes and Sophia's determination, but thankfully not the tendency toward premature gray. A letter from Sarah sat on the side table, full of news about her life in the city and gentle encouragement for her mother to find some companionship. Sarah worried about her being alone, though Sophia had assured her repeatedly that she was perfectly content with her independence. Yet as darkness settled over the ranch and she retired inside, lighting lamps against the encroaching shadows, Sophia admitted to herself that the prospect of Drew Holloway's visit had kindled something within her that felt surprisingly like anticipation. The next morning dawned clear and warm, typical for late spring in the Sacramento Valley. Sophia rose early, as was her habit, and set about her chores with an energy that had Elena raising knowing eyebrows. You seem in good spirits today, Senora, the housekeeper commented as Sophia arranged fresh-cut flowers on the dining table, something she hadn't bothered with for months. It's a beautiful day, Elena, Sophia replied, avoiding the older woman's perceptive gaze. And we have a potential business opportunity this afternoon. Miguel mentioned the new rancher is coming. Elena's dark eyes twinkled. He also mentioned the man is not married. Sophia felt heat rise to her face, absurdly girlish for a woman of her years. His marital status is hardly relevant to his need for good horses. Elena merely smiled and returned to her dusting, but her knowing look followed Sophia as she escaped to the stables. The morning passed quickly as Sophia worked with the young filly, a spirited creature with intelligent eyes and graceful movements. By midday, she was satisfied with their progress and turned the horse over to Carlos for cooling down and grooming. Returning to the house, Sophia found herself hesitating before her wardrobe. She typically wore practical riding skirts and simple blouses for work around the ranch. But today, she found herself selecting a dress she hadn't worn in some time, a deep blue that James had once said brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Don't be foolish, she muttered to herself, returning the dress to its hook and pulling out her usual attire. But after a moment's deliberation, she compromised with a newer riding skirt and a crisp white blouse with delicate embroidery along the collar. After a quick lunch, she brushed her hair and considered, not for the first time, using the hair dye that her friend Martha had recommended from a ladies' magazine. But something stopped her, as it always did, perhaps a feeling that to disguise the gray would be to deny the life she had lived, the child she had borne, the husband she had loved and lost. Instead, she twisted it into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, secured it with pins, and placed her wide-brimmed straw hat atop it for protection from the afternoon sun. She was in the stable, giving final instructions to Miguel about the horses to be presented, when the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Drew Holloway's arrival. Squaring her shoulders, Sophia stepped out into the yard just as he dismounted from a handsome black stallion. "Mrs. Harrington," he greeted her, removing his hat. In the full daylight, she could see that his hair, though still predominantly dark, was indeed liberally streaked with silver at the temples. "Mr. Holloway," she returned. "Welcome to Harrington Ranch, Drew, remember?" His smile was warm. "And thank you. You've kept the place up beautifully. That's not easy for anyone, let alone," he stopped abruptly. "A woman alone," Sophia finished for him, a slight edge to her voice. "I was going to say someone without much help," Drew corrected gently. "I noticed you've got just the Vasquez family working for you. Most operations this size would have more hands." Sophia relaxed slightly. "We manage. Quality over quantity in horses and people, my husband always said." Drew nodded appreciatively. "Wise man. I'm looking forward to seeing these horses of yours that everyone in town speaks so highly of." For the next hour, Sophia led Drew through her operation, showing him the paddocks, the breeding records, and finally, the horses themselves. Miguel brought out the chestnut gelding first, and Carlos put the horse through his paces, while Sophia explained his lineage and training. Drew asked intelligent questions, showing a depth of knowledge that impressed her. He examined each animal carefully, treating them with respect and genuine interest. "And this," Sophia said as the bay was led back to the stable and Carlos emerged with the filly, "is Starlight. She's not officially for sale, but I wanted you to see what our breeding program is capable of producing." The filly pranced into the paddock, her movements fluid and powerful despite her youth. Drew watched with evident admiration as Carlos demonstrated her responsiveness to commands. "She's magnificent," Drew said softly. "You've done remarkable work here." "Thank you," Sophia replied, genuinely pleased by his assessment. "My husband started our breeding program, but I've continued refining it. These horses aren't just pretty, they're intelligent, sound, and have the endurance needed for ranch work." "I can see that." Drew turned to face her directly, and Sophia was struck again by the intensity of his blue gaze. "I'd like to purchase both the gelding and the bay, if you're willing to part with them." Sophia named her price, a fair one that reflected the quality of the animals without being excessive. Drew didn't even attempt to negotiate, simply nodding his agreement. "I can bring payment tomorrow and arrange to have them delivered next week if that suits," he said. "That would be fine," Sophia replied, oddly disappointed that their business was concluding so efficiently. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" The invitation slipped out before she could consider it fully, and she found herself holding her breath as she waited for his response. Drew's face brightened. "I'd like that very much." They left the horses with Miguel and Carlos and set out on foot, walking first to the creek that bordered her property, then up a gentle rise that offered a view of the entire ranch and the mountains beyond. "It's beautiful country," Drew commented as they stood side by side, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the landscape. "Reminds me of where I grew up in Colorado. What brought you to California?" Sophia asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about this man who had somehow punctured the invisible barrier that had surrounded her for years. Drew's expression grew distant. "A need for change, I suppose. My wife died 5 years ago. Fever took her quickly. Our son was already grown and settled with his own family in Denver. There wasn't much holding me there anymore." "I'm sorry about your wife," Sophia said softly. It's not easy, is it, moving forward alone? No, Drew agreed, meeting her eyes with understanding that could only come from shared experience. It isn't, though I suspect you've done a better job of it than I have. This place, he gestured to the well-maintained ranch below them, speaks to your strength. Sophia felt a curious mixture of pride and vulnerability at his words. Some days are better than others, she admitted, but the work keeps me going. The responsibility. And your family, my daughter, Sarah, lives in San Francisco with her husband. She visits when she can, but it's a long journey. Sophia smiled slightly. She writes often, telling me I should find companionship, as she puts it. Drew chuckled. My son says the same, as if it were as simple as ordering something from a catalog. Their laughter mingled in the warm air, and Sophia realized with a start that this was the first time she'd truly laughed in longer than she cared to remember. As they made their way back to the house, the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. Elena had obviously been watching for their return, as she appeared on the porch just as they approached. Senora, I have prepared refreshments if you and your guest would like to sit a while, she announced, her expression innocent despite the knowing glint in her eye. Thank you, Elena, Sophia said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Mr. Holloway probably needs to return to his own ranch before dark, however. Actually, Drew said, I'd be grateful for a moment to rest before the ride back if it's not imposing. And so they found themselves seated on Sophia's porch as twilight descended, sipping lemonade and continuing their conversation as if they'd known each other for years, rather than hours. Drew told her about his ranch in Colorado, about his son and 3 grandchildren, about his decision to start fresh in California after years of feeling like he was merely existing. In turn, Sophia shared stories of building the horse breeding business with James, of Sarah's childhood antics, of the challenges she'd faced taking over the ranch operations after being widowed. The hardest part, she confessed, watching the first stars appear in the deepening blue sky, isn't the work itself. It's the way people stop seeing you. As a widow, especially one who's going gray, you become a sort of ghost in town, present but not really noticed. Drew was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then he set down his empty glass and turned to face her directly. I noticed you the moment you walked into that store yesterday, he said, his voice low and earnest. Not because of your hair, though it's beautiful like moonlight on dark water. I noticed you because you carry yourself with dignity. There's a quiet strength about you that's far more compelling than any superficial beauty. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks, unaccustomed to such direct compliments. You're kind to say so, not kind, honest. Drew hesitated, then added, when I first saw you, do you know what I thought? I thought, there's the most beautiful woman alive and nobody else can see it. The words hung between them in the gathering darkness, weighted with sincerity. Sophia found herself unable to look away from his gaze, unable to dismiss his compliment as mere flattery. There was something in his eyes' recognition, understanding, appreciation that resonated with a long-neglected part of her soul. The moment was broken by Miguel's approach, leading Drew's stallion from where it had been given water and rest. Your horse, senor, Miguel said, glancing between them with poorly concealed interest. Drew stood reluctantly. Thank you. He turned back to Sophia, who had also risen. I should go. But I'll return tomorrow with payment for the horses, if that's still agreeable. Of course, Sophia replied, suddenly aware of how much she was looking forward to seeing him again. Afternoon would be best. As Drew mounted his horse, he looked down at her with a smile that seemed to hold promise. Until tomorrow, then, Sophia. She watched him ride away, his figure gradually disappearing into the darkness, and realized she was still standing on the porch long after he'd gone from sight. Inside, Elena was clearing away the glasses with a knowing smile. A good man, I think, she observed casually. Strong hands, kind eyes, and he looks at you como si fueras el sol like you are the sun. Don't be ridiculous, Elena, Sophia protested, but her heart wasn't in the denial. He's a neighbor and a customer, nothing more. If you say so, senora. Elena's tone made it clear she believed otherwise. But perhaps you might wear the blue dress tomorrow, no, for business purposes, of course. Sophia shook her head at her housekeeper's transparent matchmaking, but found herself considering the suggestion as she prepared for bed. The blue dress had hung unworn for so long. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation and routine chores. Sophia checked and double-checked the sale papers for the horses, ensured the animals themselves were in perfect condition, and despite her best efforts to be sensible found herself donning the blue dress after her midday meal. Elena's approving nod as she emerged from her room only increased Sophia's self-consciousness. "It is just a practical choice for receiving a business visitor," she insisted. "Of course, Senora," Elena agreed with exaggerated solemnity. "Very practical. And the ribbon in your hair also for business." Sophia's hand flew to the simple blue ribbon she had used to tie back her hair instead of her usual severe bun. "It's warm today," she said weakly. When Drew arrived, promptly at 2 o'clock as promised, his appreciative glance told Sophia that her efforts, practical or otherwise, had not gone unnoticed. He, too, seemed to have taken extra care with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and vest beneath his riding coat, his beard neatly trimmed. The business transaction was quickly completed, with Drew providing payment in full and signing the necessary papers. With that formality out of the way, they found themselves facing each other somewhat awkwardly in Sophia's sitting room. "I brought something for you," Drew said suddenly, reaching into his coat pocket. "A small thank you for your hospitality yesterday." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Sophia opened it carefully to find a beautifully carved wooden hair comb inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "It's lovely," she breathed, running her finger over the delicate design. "I noticed you wear your hair up," Drew explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "Thought it might be useful. The carving my father taught me when I was young. I've always found working with my hands helps me think." The revelation that he had made the comb himself touched Sophia deeply. It was not merely a purchased trinket, but something he had crafted with his own hands, invested with his time and skill. "Thank you," she said softly. "I shall treasure it." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Drew cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might be willing to advise me on some aspects of my ranch setup. I have experience, of course, but each property has its unique challenges, and you know this area." Sophia recognized the request for what it was: an opportunity to continue their acquaintance beyond the sale of the horses. "I'd be happy to," she replied. "Perhaps you could show me your place sometime and I could offer suggestions." Drew's face brightened. "I'd like that. Though I should warn you, it's not in nearly as good condition as your ranch. The Milner place has been sitting empty for months." "All the more reason for a fresh perspective," Sophia said. "When would be convenient for you?" They arranged to meet in 3 days' time, with Drew insisting on coming to escort her to his property. "The road gets confusing near the creek crossing," he explained. As he prepared to leave, Drew hesitated at the door. "There's to be a town social next Saturday, I'm told." "A spring dance or some such?" "Yes," Sophia confirmed. "Chico holds one every year. I haven't attended since James died. Would you consider attending this year?" Drew asked, his usually confident voice edged with uncertainty. "With me." The invitation took Sophia by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Their connection had grown rapidly from business acquaintance to something more personal, though she was still wary of defining exactly what that something might be. "As friends, of course," Drew added hastily when she didn't immediately respond. "Newcomer that I am, I could use a guide to local society." Sophia found herself smiling at his transparent attempt to give her an easy way to accept. "As friends," she agreed. "Though I should warn you, I haven't danced in years." "That makes 2 of us," Drew replied, relief evident in his expression. "We can be rusty together." After he departed, Sophia stood for a long moment with the wooden comb in her hand, feeling as if something long dormant within her was slowly awakening. The prospect of attending the social and event she'd avoided, since becoming a widow, brought both anxiety and an unexpected thrill of anticipation. Elena found her still standing there, lost in thought. "So," the housekeeper said with barely contained excitement, "you have accepted his invitation to the dance, no?" Sophia shot her a startled look. "How did you— the walls in this house, they are not so thick," Alina confessed unapologetically. "And my ears, they work very well." Shaking her head in resignation, Sophia moved to place the comb carefully on her dressing table. "Yes, I've accepted. As friends," she emphasized. "Claro, as friends," Alina agreed, following her into the bedroom. "Friends who look at each other like starving people at a feast. Now, about your dress for this occasion, Alina. The blue is beautiful, but perhaps the green. It has been many years since you wore it, but I think it still fits, and the color is so rich with your skin and eyes." Despite her protests, Sophia found herself allowing Alina to open the wardrobe and assess her limited formal attire, the older woman's enthusiasm infectious. The green dress Alina referred to had been made for Sarah's 18th birthday celebration, an extravagance Sophia had rarely worn since. Did it still fit? Would it be too much after years of practical clothing? The next few days passed in a flurry of activity, as Sophia divided her attention between ranch operations and preparations for both her visit to Drew's property and the upcoming social. Alina insisted on taking out the green dress, making subtle alterations to update its style and ensure a proper fit. "You have not changed so much, Senora," Alina assured her as she pinned a seam. "Perhaps a little more here," she indicated Sophia's waist, "but that is life, no. We earn our softness." On the morning Sophia was to visit Drew's ranch, she woke early and found herself spending more time than usual on her appearance. She chose a riding outfit that was both practical and flattering, and used Drew's comb to secure her hair in a style that was less severe than her usual bun. When Drew arrived to escort her, his appreciative glance told her the effort had been worthwhile. They rode side by side along the main road, before turning west onto a less traveled path that eventually led to what had been the Milner property. As they crested a rise, the ranch came into view, a sprawling property with good bones but clear signs of neglect. The main house, a substantial two-story structure, had weathered siding and a sagging porch. The barn and outbuildings, while structurally sound, needed repair and fresh paint. The corrals were intact but missing gates in places, and the pastures were overgrown. "I warned you it needed work," Drew said with a rueful smile as they approached. "It has excellent potential," Sophia replied honestly. "Samuel Milner built solid structures, and the land itself is good. Water access, grazing, shelter, everything you need is here. It just requires attention." Drew's expression brightened at her assessment. "That's what I thought too. Worth the investment of time and labor to bring it back." He gave her a comprehensive tour, showing her the house first empty of furniture except for a few pieces he'd brought with him, and some left behind by the previous owner. The rooms were spacious but dusty, with faded wallpaper and floors that needed refinishing. "I've been sleeping downstairs," Drew explained as they moved through the house. "Seemed pointless to try to furnish all of this just for me." "It's a home meant for a family," Sophia observed, running her hand along a door frame marked with height measurements, evidence of children long grown. Drew nodded, a fleeting sadness crossing his features. "Like yours, I imagine. Do you rattle around in your house as well?" "Sometimes," Sophia admitted. "Though having the Vasquez family nearby helps, and I've closed off rooms we don't use to save on heating and cleaning." They moved on to the barn and outbuildings, where Drew had already begun repairs, replacing broken boards and reinforcing structural elements. "You've made good progress," Sophia noted, impressed by how much he'd accomplished alone. "I've arranged for some help starting next week," Drew said. "Hired 2 local men with carpentry experience, but I wanted to get a start on the most critical repairs myself." As they walked the property line, discussing water management and pasture rotation, Sophia found herself offering practical suggestions based on her years of experience with similar land. Drew listened attentively, asking insightful questions and occasionally jotting notes in a small book he carried. "You have a good eye for this," he told her as they paused by a small stream that cut through the property. "Better than mine in many ways." "I've had time to learn," Sophia replied. "When James died, I either had to understand every aspect of ranching or lose everything we'd built." Drew's gaze was contemplative. "It couldn't have been easy. No, she agreed, but necessity is a thorough teacher. She hesitated, then added, and I had to prove something, I think to myself and others. That I wasn't just James Harrington's wife but capable in my own right. You've more than proved it, Drew said quietly. Your ranch is one of the best-run operations I've seen. The sincerity in his voice warmed her, and Sophia found herself sharing more of her experiences, the challenges she'd faced, the mistakes she'd made and learned from, the satisfaction of seeing the ranch thrive under her management. As the afternoon waned, Drew suggested they rest before the ride back. He'd set up a small living area in what had once been the Milner family's parlor, with a comfortable sofa and chairs arranged near the fireplace. Not much in the way of refreshments, I'm afraid, he apologized, offering her water from a clean tin cup. I'm not much of a cook and I haven't found a housekeeper yet. You might ask in town, Sophia suggested, settling into a surprisingly comfortable armchair. Mrs. Peterson at the church often knows of people looking for work. Drew sat opposite her, stretching his long legs toward the cold hearth. I'll do that. Can't live on beans and bacon forever, though I've managed so far. The mental image of this capable man attempting to sustain himself on such basic fare brought a smile to Sophia's face. Elena would be horrified. She believes good food is essential to life. She's right, Drew agreed fervently. I've never appreciated a well-cooked meal more than in these past weeks of my own attempts. They talked easily as the shadows lengthened outside, moving from practical matters of ranch management to more personal topics. Drew spoke of his life in Colorado, of his late wife Catherine's passion for music, of his son Daniel's decision to become a doctor instead of following in his ranching footsteps. I was disappointed at first, he admitted. Had always assumed he'd take over the ranch eventually. But he has a healer's touch and a sharp mind. He's made a good life in Denver and I'm proud of him. It's hard to let them find their own path, Sophia agreed, thinking of Sarah's determination to move to San Francisco despite her parents' concerns. But watching them succeed in their chosen life brings its own joy. When it came time to leave, Drew insisted on escorting her all the way back to her ranch, though it meant he would be riding home in full darkness. I can't in good conscience allow you to ride alone this late, he said firmly when she protested. The road is rough in places, and there have been reports of drifters in the area. The journey back was peaceful, the setting sun painting the landscape in rich golds and purples. They rode mostly in comfortable silence, occasionally commenting on features of the land or sharing observations about the changing season. As they approached her ranch, the windows of her house glowing with welcoming lamplight, Sophia realized how much she had enjoyed the day, not just Drew's company, though that had been unexpectedly pleasant, but the opportunity to share her knowledge and experience with someone who valued her expertise. Drew dismounted first when they reached her yard, then moved to help her down from her horse. His hands at her waist were strong and steady, and for a brief moment after her feet touched the ground, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling evening air. Thank you for coming today, he said, his voice low. Your insights were invaluable. I enjoyed seeing your ranch, Sophia replied truthfully. It will be wonderful when you've completed the renovations. Drew's hands fell away reluctantly, and he stepped back to a more proper distance. I'm still looking forward to Saturday, he said. The social. As am I, Sophia admitted, surprised to find it was entirely true. The prospect of attending a public event that she had avoided for years now held appeal rather than dread. With a tip of his hat and a warm smile, Drew mounted his horse and departed, leaving Sophia standing in her yard with an unfamiliar lightness in her heart. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Elena was relentless in her efforts to ensure Sophia would look her best for the social, pressing the green dress and insisting on retrieving a pair of delicate earrings that had been packed away since James' death. You are not betraying his memory by living, Senora, Elena said gently when Sophia hesitated over wearing jewelry James had given her. He would want you to find joy again. Perhaps it was true. James had been a loving, practical man who had always encouraged her to be strong and independent. In their final days together, As the pneumonia robbed him of breath, he had made her promise to keep the ranch, to care for herself and Sarah, to find happiness however it comes. Had she been honoring that promise these past 3 years? Or had she merely been surviving, allowing herself to fade into the background of her own life? Saturday arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for the town's social. Sophia spent the morning on routine ranch chores, deliberately keeping busy to manage her growing nervousness. By mid-afternoon, she could delay no longer and surrendered to Alina's ministrations. The green dress fit better than she'd feared. The subtle alterations Alina had made ensuring it complemented her figure without being uncomfortably tight. Her gray-streaked hair, usually pulled severely back, was arranged more softly, with Drew's carved comb securing it at the back while allowing tendrils to frame her face. "You look beautiful, Senora," Alina declared, standing back to admire her work. "Young again." Sophia studied her reflection in the mirror with mixed emotions. The woman who gazed back at her was indeed softer, more approachable than the stern-faced widow she had become accustomed to seeing. The green of the dress brightened her hazel eyes, and the more feminine hairstyle lent a gentleness to her features. Yet she was still undeniably a woman of 42, with lines at the corners of her eyes and silver threading through her hair. Not young, not conventionally pretty by the standards that measured the town's unmarried girls, but perhaps, as Drew had suggested, beautiful in her own right. When Drew arrived to escort her to town, his reaction confirmed Alina's assessment. He stood in her parlor, hat in hand, staring at her with such open admiration that Sophia felt color rising to her cheeks. "You look," he began, then seemed to struggle for adequate words. "Magnificent," he settled on finally. "Truly magnificent." "Thank you," Sophia replied, accepting his compliment with as much grace as she could muster despite her embarrassment. "You're quite handsome yourself." It was no empty flattery. Drew had clearly taken pains with his appearance, wearing a well-tailored dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. His silver-streaked hair was neatly combed, and his beard precisely trimmed. As they rode into town in Sophia's small buggy, she found herself growing increasingly nervous about being seen publicly with Drew. It had been years since she'd attended a social function on the arm of a man, and Chico was a town that thrived on gossip. Drew seemed to sense her unease. Having second thoughts, he asked gently as they approached the town hall, already lit up and buzzing with activity. "Not about coming with you," Sophia clarified. It's been a long time since I've been to one of these events, and longer still since I attended with a gentleman." "We can leave any time you wish," Drew assured her. "Just say the word." His understanding calmed her somewhat, and Sophia straightened her shoulders as they pulled up to the hitching post outside the hall. "No need for that, I'm just being foolish." "Not foolish," Drew said, helping her down from the buggy. "Brave." The word bolstered her confidence, and Sophia accepted his arm as they walked toward the entrance. Inside, the town hall had been transformed with lanterns, ribbons, and spring flowers. A small band played in one corner, and couples already moved across the dance floor while others clustered in conversational groups around the perimeter. Their entrance caused a noticeable ripple of interest. Sophia was acutely aware of heads turning, whispers passing between neighbors, curious glances directed their way. It was, she realized with a strange mixture of discomfort and satisfaction, the opposite of invisibility. Martha Peterson, Sophia's closest friend in town, broke away from a group and hurried toward them, her round face alight with surprise and pleasure. "Sophia, I didn't expect to see you tonight." She glanced meaningfully at Drew, and with company no less. "Martha, allow me to introduce Drew Holloway," Sophia said, performing the introduction with as much dignity as she could muster. "Drew, this is my friend Martha Peterson." Drew bowed slightly over Martha's extended hand. "A pleasure, Mrs. Peterson. I believe your husband mentioned you might know of someone seeking housekeeping work." Martha beamed, clearly delighted to be consulted on town matters. "Indeed I do. Widow Johnson's daughter, Abigail, is looking for just such a position. Excellent cook, neat as a pin, and trustworthy. I can arrange an introduction if you'd like." "I would appreciate that very much." Drew replied with genuine gratitude. Martha turned back to Sophia, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You look absolutely lovely, dear. That shade of green is perfect on you. I always said you should wear it more often. Before Sophia could respond, they were approached by Mayor Collins and his wife, necessitating another round of introductions. Drew handled the social niceties with ease, charming Mrs. Collins while discussing potential town improvements with the mayor. As the evening progressed, Sophia gradually relaxed into the unexpected role of introducing Drew to the community. They circulated through the crowd, stopping to speak with merchants, ranchers, and townspeople Sophia had known for years, but interacted with only minimally since James' death. What surprised her most was how differently people treated her with Drew at her side. Men who had barely acknowledged her business acumen now sought her opinion on livestock prices and breeding techniques. Women who had relegated her to the edges of their social circles suddenly included her in their conversations. It was both gratifying and infuriating to realize how much her perceived value had been diminished by widowhood, and then partially restored simply by appearing with a respectable man. You seem thoughtful, Drew observed during a quiet moment as they stood near the refreshment table. I'm realizing how fickle society can be, Sophia replied, watching the dancers swirl past. 3 years of competently running my ranch earned me polite nods in town. One evening on your arm and suddenly I'm worth conversing with again. Drew frowned. Their loss these past 3 years, though I can't say I'm entirely sorry they overlooked you, or I might have had more competition for your company. The comment, delivered with a twinkle in his eye that softened its presumption, startled a laugh from Sophia. Very smooth, Mr. Holloway. I try, Mrs. Harrington. Drew set down his punch cup and offered his hand. Would you care to dance? I warned you I'm rusty, but the music is pleasant, and I find myself unwilling to waste this opportunity. Sophia hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. I did promise to be rusty with you. They moved onto the dance floor as the band began a waltz. Drew's hand settled respectfully at her waist, the other clasping hers as they began to move with the music. His steps were sure despite his claimed rustiness, and Sophia found herself following his lead with increasing confidence. You dance well for a man who hasn't practiced, she observed as he guided her through a turn. Some things the body remembers, Drew replied, like riding or roping or holding a beautiful woman. The compliment brought warmth to Sophia's cheeks, but she didn't look away from his gaze. You're very free with your flattery, sir. Not flattery, truth. Drew's expression grew more serious. I've spent 5 years avoiding moments like this, Sophia, avoiding connections, avoiding possibilities. Coming to California was about more than a fresh start for my ranch. It was about allowing myself to live again, to see again. The honesty in his voice touched something deep within her. I understand that, she said quietly. I've been existing rather than living too. It seemed safer. Safer, yes, but emptier. Drew's hand tightened slightly on her waist, until I walked into that store and saw a woman with magnificent silver-threaded hair and eyes that held both strength and sorrow. They danced in silence for several measures, the music washing over them as they absorbed the weight of what had been shared. Sophia was acutely aware of Drew's hand at her waist, of the slight roughness of his palm against hers, of the way his eyes never left her face. When the music ended, they remained standing close for a heartbeat longer than propriety dictated before stepping apart. The spell was broken by Martha approaching, her expression a mixture of delight and concern. You two make a handsome couple, she declared, linking her arm through Sophia's. But I'm afraid there's quite a bit of talk, dear. You know how Chico can be. Let them talk, Sophia replied with newfound confidence. I've done nothing inappropriate by attending a public event with a friend. Of course not, Martha agreed quickly. And it's high time you rejoined society. I've said so for ages. I'm just warning you that Harriet Miller is in rare form tonight, speculating about unseemly haste and such nonsense. Sophia was familiar with Harriet Miller's propensity for stirring up gossip. The woman had never approved of Sophia taking over the ranch after James died, considering it unnatural for a woman to engage in business. Mrs. Miller's opinion of me was set long before tonight, Sophia said dryly. I doubt I could do anything to improve it. Drew, who had been listening to this exchange with growing concern, touched Sophia's elbow gently. If my presence is causing difficulties for you, it isn't, Sophia interrupted firmly. I've spent 3 years fading into the background of my own life, Drew. I won't apologize for stepping back into it. Her declaration seemed to both surprise and please him. In that case, he said with a smile, would you care to scandalize Mrs. Miller further with another dance? They remained at the social for another hour, dancing twice more and conversing with various townspeople. By the time they departed, Sophia had weathered the curious looks and whispered comments with more equanimity than she would have thought possible a week earlier. The night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded hall. Drew helped Sophia into the buggy and settled beside her, taking up the reins for the drive back to her ranch. Thank you for accompanying me tonight, he said as they left the town behind. It meant a great deal to have you there. I enjoyed myself more than I expected to, Sophia admitted, though I suspect we'll be the subject of town gossip for some time. Drew glanced at her in the moonlight. Does that trouble you? Sophia considered the question honestly. Less than it would have before meeting you, she said finally. I've spent too long caring what others think, allowing their perceptions to define me, first as James' wife, then as his widow. It's liberating to remember I'm simply Sophia. There's nothing simple about you, Sophia Harrington, Drew replied softly. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable conversation about the evening, the music, the refreshments, the people they'd spoken with. When they reached her ranch, Drew helped her from the buggy and walked her to the porch. Standing in the soft glow of the lamp Alina had left burning, Sophia found herself reluctant for the evening to end. Would you like to come in for coffee? It's a long ride back to your place. Drew's expression suggested he was equally reluctant to depart. I'd like that very much. Inside, they found that Alina had left a small fire burning in the hearth and coffee keeping warm on the stove, clear evidence of the housekeeper's approval and matchmaking intentions. Sophia poured 2 cups, and they settled in the parlor, the familiar room somehow different with Drew's presence. I've been thinking about what you said, Drew began after a moment, about being invisible. I felt that way too after Catherine died. As if I'd become a ghost in my own community, the widower, the object of pity, someone to be managed rather than engaged with. Yes, Sophia agreed, relieved to have her experience understood. Exactly that, and after a while you begin to accept it, to expect it even. Until someone sees you, Drew said, his gaze intent. Really sees you. The weight of his words hung between them, laden with meaning beyond their simple structure. Sophia felt an answering resonance within herself, a recognition of the profound truth he'd expressed. Yes, she said again, more softly. Until then. Drew set his coffee cup aside and leaned forward slightly. I meant what I said that first day, Sophia, about seeing the most beautiful woman alive. It wasn't flattery or exaggeration, it was recognition. Sophia's breath caught at the naked honesty in his expression. Drew, you don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. I know this is unexpected for both of us. I came to California looking for a fresh start, not, he gestured vaguely between them. Not this connection, but I can't pretend I don't feel it, don't want to explore it. Sophia placed her own cup on the side table, her hands suddenly unsteady. I feel it too, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing, but I don't know if I'm ready, if I remember how to. We can take our time, Drew said gently. There's no rush, no pressure. Just 2 people who have found something unexpected and precious. The sincerity in his voice calmed Sophia's rising anxiety. This wasn't a young man's impetuous passion, but a mature man's considered affection, something built on shared experiences and mutual respect. I'd like that, she said finally, to see where this leads, slowly. Drew's smile was warm with promise. Slowly it is then. When he left shortly thereafter, his departure was marked by nothing more intimate than a lingering clasp of hands and a shared look of understanding. Yet Sophia felt as if something profound had shifted within her world, as if colors had begun to seep back into a landscape that had been rendered in shades of gray for too long. In the weeks that followed, Drew became a regular visitor to the Harrington ranch. They established a pattern of shared meals, long rides across their adjoining properties, and evenings spent in conversation by the fire. Drew found his housekeeper through Martha's recommendation, and soon his ranch began to take on a more inhabited, cared-for appearance. The horses Sophia had sold him were delivered as agreed, and Drew purchased 2 more from her stock as his operation expanded. Their business relationship provided a practical foundation for their growing personal connection, giving them common ground beyond their widowed status and mutual attraction. Sophia found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She began taking more care with her appearance again, not dramatically, but small touches that reflected an awakening interest in being seen. She wore the blue ribbon in her hair more often, used Drew's carved comb to secure her increasingly softer hairstyles, and allowed Alina to update some of her clothing to more flattering styles. Drew noticed these changes and commented on them with appreciation, but never presumption. True to his word, he let their relationship develop at a pace that respected Sophia's caution and honored her need for independence. They attended church together on Sundays, weathering the initial burst of gossip until their partnership, whatever its exact nature, became an accepted fact in the community. Sophia was surprised to find that while some, like Harriet Miller, maintained their disapproval, most of her neighbors seemed genuinely pleased to see her re-emerging from the shell of widowhood. "You're different," Martha observed one afternoon as they sat on Sophia's porch drinking lemonade. "There's a lightness about you I haven't seen since before James fell ill." "I feel different," Sophia admitted. "More present in my own life," Martha nodded approvingly. "Drew Holloway is good for you, and unless I'm much mistaken, you're good for him too. He's putting down roots here, becoming part of the community." It was true. Drew had joined the town council, offering practical suggestions for improvements to the roads and water systems. He'd hired local men to help with his ranch renovations, and had begun establishing himself as a respected voice in community matters. As summer progressed into early autumn, Sophia found herself growing increasingly comfortable with Drew's presence in her life. They developed routines and inside jokes, learned each other's preferences and peculiarities, built a friendship that served as the foundation for deeper feelings neither had rushed to name. One crisp October evening, nearly 5 months after their first meeting in the general store, Drew arrived at Sophia's ranch with a more formal air than usual. He had sent a note earlier asking if he might call that evening, rather than simply appearing as had become his habit. Alina, sensing something significant in the air, had prepared an especially nice dinner and made herself scarce afterward, retreating to her quarters above the stable with her husband and son. Drew seemed nervous as they sat in the parlor after their meal, a departure from his usual easy confidence. He turned his coffee cup in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Is everything all right?" Sophia asked, concerned by his demeanor. "You seem troubled." Drew set his cup down decisively. "Not troubled, just trying to find the right words." He drew a deep breath. "Sophia, these past months have been the happiest I've known in years. Getting to know you, spending time with you, watching you reclaim your joy, it's been a privilege." The formal nature of his speech sent a flutter of anticipation through Sophia. "I've felt the same," she said softly. Drew nodded, seeming encouraged by her response. "I came to California seeking a new beginning, but I found something far more precious than I had dared to hope for. I found you a woman of strength and grace, intelligence and beauty." He rose from his chair and, to Sophia's astonishment, knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I'm not a young man offering impulsive passion," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I'm offering thoughtful love, partnership, respect. I'm offering to build a life together, combining our strengths and sharing our burdens." Sophia felt tears gathering as she realized where this was leading. "Drew, Sophia Harrington, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of joining our lives and our land, of creating a future neither of us expected but both, I think, deeply desire." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Sophia looked into Drew's face, the face that had become so dear to her over these months, that had seen her when others looked past, that had reflected back to her not just who she was but who she could be. "Yes," she answered, her voice clear despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Drew Holloway." Joy transformed his features as he rose, drawing her to her feet and into his embrace. For the first time, he kissed her, not the hesitant kiss she might have expected, but one filled with certainty and promise, with tenderness and restrained passion. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Drew reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I hope you'll like this," he said, opening it to reveal a ring. "It's not elaborate, but it reminded me of you, elegant and enduring." The ring was indeed beautiful in its simplicity, a band of gold supporting a modest diamond flanked by two small sapphires. It was neither ostentatious nor insignificant, but perfectly balanced, like the relationship they had built. "It's beautiful," Sophia said, as Drew slipped it onto her finger. "Perfect." They were married 6 weeks later in Chico's small church, with Sarah and her husband traveling from San Francisco for the occasion, and Drew's son Daniel and his family making the journey from Denver. The town turned out in force for the event, the community that had once overlooked Sophia now celebrating her happiness with genuine warmth. Sophia wore a dress of deep blue silk that Alina had helped design, with Drew's carved comb securing her hair, which she wore down in soft waves as a symbol of her transformation from the severely coiffed widow she had been. At 42 and 45, respectively, they were not young lovers embarking on a first marriage, but mature partners choosing to unite their lives, their properties, and their futures with clear eyes and full hearts. "I see you," Drew whispered as they stood together after the ceremony, a private moment amidst the celebration. "I always will." "And I see you," Sophia replied, touching his face with tender familiarity. "The man who taught me I wasn't invisible after all." In the years that followed, the combined Holloway-Harrington ranch became one of the most successful in the county. Their horse breeding program expanded under Sophia's expert guidance, while Drew's innovations in water management and sustainable grazing practices brought them recognition beyond Chico. They built a new house halfway between their original properties, a home designed for comfort rather than show, with wide porches for watching sunsets and a library filled with books they read aloud to each other on winter evenings. Sarah presented them with grandchildren who loved visiting the ranch, learning to ride under their grandmother's tutelage and to carve wood with their grandfather's patient instruction. Daniel's children came for extended summer visits, the cousins forming bonds that would last lifetimes. And if visitors to the ranch sometimes remarked on the striking couple who ran it, the tall, silver-haired man and the elegant woman whose once prematurely gray hair had now turned a luminous white, they never spoke of age or time's passage, but only of the evident affection between them, of the way they moved in tandem through their days, of how they always seemed to see each other with fresh appreciation even after years together. For Sophia had learned that invisibility was not an inevitable condition of aging, but a state that could be overcome by the right pair of eyes that saw beyond surface to substance, beyond convention to character, beyond gray hair to the woman herself. And in being truly seen, she had found not just love but renewal, not just partnership but purpose. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades reminiscent of that first evening they had spent together, Drew took Sophia's hand and raised it to his lips. "Still the most beautiful woman alive," he said, the words both a reminder of their beginning and a testament to their enduring bond. Sophia smiled, the lines at the corners of her eyes deepening with genuine happiness. "Only because you see me," she replied. "You always have." And as the last rays of sunlight gilded her white hair to silver and gold, Sophia Holloway knew that the invisibility she had once accepted as her fate had been not an inevitable condition, but merely a temporary shadow, dispelled by love's clearer vision.